My parents paid me to drop out of college so my cousin could go instead. You're not smart enough anyway, Mom whispered. Now I own the company he works at. Years ago, my parents pressured me to give up my college spot so my cousin could attend in my place. They even paid me off and told me I wasn't smart enough for school. I struggled for years but quietly earned my degree, worked my way up, and now I'm the CEO of the company my cousin just got hired at. Celeste, sit down. That's how it started. I was 19, halfway through packing for my freshman year at Carnegie Mellon. The acceptance letter still sat pinned to the corkboard in my childhood bedroom, right next to the brochure I'd dog-eared to death, pictures of tech labs, students clustered around laptops, the library that looked like it belonged in a movie. I was ready. I'd waited for this. But when I walked downstairs and saw both my parents at the kitchen table, silent with their hands folded, I knew something was wrong. We just need to talk to you about something important, my mom said, avoiding my eyes. That conversation changed everything. Looking back, I didn't even really understand what they were asking me to do. Not at first. They said it wouldn't be forever. Just a year. They promised they'd help me later. My cousin Spencer hadn't gotten into any of the schools he'd applied to, and it had devastated my uncle Merrick, Mom's brother, and his wife. They were desperate. Spencer needed a fresh start. They needed a miracle. And my college acceptance was that miracle. He just needs a spot, my mom said like it was an everyday request. His parents are already talking to admissions, my dad added quietly. It's all worked out. They just need you to defer. That word, defer, made it sound so simple. Like I could pause my dream the way you'd pause a movie. 1 year. That's what they said. But even then, I knew. I was just the backup plan. And when I hesitated, when I said, I've worked for this for years, my mom leaned in and said something I haven't been able to forget since. You're not smart enough anyway. This is for the best. She said it softly. Not cruelly. Not like an insult, but like a sad truth she thought I needed to accept. They offered me $10,000 from my college fund to sweeten the deal. Just enough to keep me quiet, to make it feel like a decision I made on my own. I took the money. I don't know why. Maybe because I still needed their approval. Maybe because I didn't know how to stand up for myself yet. Maybe because I believed her. Spencer took my place. Literally. He started school that fall at Carnegie Mellon. He even moved into the dorm I would have been assigned to, I found out from a mutual friend. I tried not to look at the pictures online, but I did. Of course I did. And when I saw him smiling at some Welcome Week event, arms around people I should have met, I shut my laptop and cried in my twin bed back home. I used the money to move into a rented room above someone's garage. It had no heating. I got a job at a local logistics company, Seymour and Wright, doing filing and invoice work. I told myself I'd go back to school next year. Next year turned into 3. Every time I brought it up, my parents had another excuse. They'd used the rest of my college fund on house repairs. They said it was too late now, that maybe I could just work my way up at my job and be grateful. Spencer's doing really well, my mom would say, almost wistfully. Like it was worth it. Spencer became the shining star. He went abroad for a semester. He posted photos in Rome, then Madrid. He interned at a startup in San Francisco. He once sent me a message, something smug and infuriating, thanking me for making a family sacrifice. He called me a team player. I started tuning it all out. No more social media. No more family barbecues. I began to detach from my parents, though I still called out of obligation. What I didn't tell them was that I'd applied to Lehigh University for their night program. I was 22, older than most undergrads, but I didn't care. I worked during the day, sometimes back-to-back shifts, then drove 40 minutes to class. I studied in my car. I barely slept. But I was alive. I graduated 3 years later with a 3.9 GPA in business analytics. No one clapped for me. No one came to my graduation. I didn't even walk the stage. I just picked up my diploma at the registrar's office and drove home alone. But that paper was the first thing I'd earned that nobody could take from me. I got my first break at a job fair in Philly. I almost didn't go because I couldn't afford a new outfit, but I wore a thrifted blazer and printed my resume at a FedEx the morning of. I met a VP named Henrietta Roth from a company called Nimbus Path, a startup focused on cloud-based logistics solutions. We talked for 10 minutes. She liked that I had real-world experience from Seymour and Wright and formal training from Lehigh. She called me the next week with a job offer. I was a data analyst making $58,000 a year. It felt like a fortune. More importantly, it was mine. I won't bore you with every step of the next 10 years, but I clawed my way up. I became Director of Logistics Strategy, then VP of Operations. I was in meetings with investors. I worked nights again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I believed in the company. And eventually, so did other people. When the founder, Dale, wanted to retire, I pitched him a vision. I had built connections. Investors. I had the numbers. The loyalty of half the company. I made an offer. And he said yes. At 34, I became the CEO of Nimbus Path. We expanded. Rapidly. We acquired a smaller logistics analytics firm based in Pittsburgh about 2 years ago. I didn't think much of it beyond the usual integration headaches, HR syncing, departmental reshuffling, system migrations. And then, one afternoon, while reviewing the internal applicant list for interdepartmental transfers, I saw the name, Spencer Merrick. I froze. He was applying for a position directly under one of my regional leads. He didn't know who owned the company. Why would he? He'd never paid attention to the industry side. For him, it was just another stepping stone. But for me? It was closed. I scheduled a meeting with him under the guise of a new team onboarding welcome. He walked into the room, and when he saw me behind the desk, his face went pale. He tried to play it cool. "Wow, small world," he said, laughing nervously. "Didn't know you worked here." "I don't work here," I said, folding my hands. "I run it." I watched him shrink in his seat. I asked him a few basic questions, kept the tone professional. He stammered through them. The meeting ended quickly. He looked like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. I didn't reject his transfer. I just left him where he was, buried in a lower division that wouldn't see a promotion for at least 5 years unless a miracle happened. That was enough. No drama. No grand confrontation. Just quiet, poetic justice. And my parents? I never told them. They called once asking for help paying off a medical bill. I said I couldn't. When my mom asked if I was doing okay, I just said, "Better than you think." I haven't seen them since. The thing people don't talk about enough, at least not out loud, is how revenge isn't loud. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It just settles. After that meeting with Spencer, I went home and sat in silence for a while. No music. No TV. Just me in my high-rise apartment, the city humming below. It had been years since I thought of him in any real way. And now, he works for me. Reporting to a team I'd handpicked. Sitting in a cubicle with my name on the plaque outside the door. I wasn't sure how to feel. I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. There was nothing left to rage against. The decisions that derailed my life had already happened. What I felt was something quieter. A kind of mournful awareness of everything that had been taken from me before I knew how to defend myself. I didn't tell anyone at work who Spencer was. Not even Henrietta, who had become something like a mentor to me over the years. I could have shared it. People love a good underdog story, right? But it felt too personal. Too raw. And besides, I knew Spencer wouldn't last. He wasn't built for this kind of work. Logistics is meticulous. It's not flashy. It requires patience, long hours, humility, traits he'd never had to develop. He was the kind of guy who was always rewarded for trying, even if he failed. That didn't fly here. By the end of his first quarter, his performance reports came in lukewarm. His supervisor, Isla, flagged him in a one-on-one review as struggling with detail-oriented tasks and resistant to feedback. I didn't intervene. I didn't need to. He was going to fade out on his own. What I didn't expect was the letter. 3 months after his onboarding, I came into the office on a Sunday afternoon. I like quiet weekends at the office, no distractions, just time to think. On my desk, sitting under a paperweight, was a cream-colored envelope with my name written in familiar, blocky handwriting. No return address. Just, Celeste. I knew instantly who it was from. Inside was a letter. 3 pages, handwritten. He didn't beg for a raise or make excuses. Instead, it was a strange mix of regret and nostalgia. He mentioned the summer we were 12, playing hide-and-seek at our grandparents' cabin in the Poconos. He said he still remembered the birthday card I gave him when we turned 16, how I'd drawn a dinosaur in the corner because he used to be obsessed with them. Then came the apology. I knew it wasn't right. But I was too selfish to care. You worked harder than anyone I knew. I let them take what you earned. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to say it out loud. You deserved that school. You deserved all of it. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and didn't open it again. I didn't write back. Some people imagine revenge like a knife to the heart. But mine was quieter. It was watching the slow realization hit him that his best days had already passed, and I was just getting started. A few weeks later, my parents tried calling again. I'd changed my number a year earlier, but my dad had managed to get the new one from a distant cousin I still spoke to occasionally. The voicemail was short. "Hi, honey, it's Mom. We just wanted to hear your voice. Your father's been in and out of appointments lately. Give us a call when you can. We miss you." I didn't call back. I listened to it once and deleted it. I didn't hate them. That's what people assume, you must be so angry. But the truth is, I don't think I had enough love left in me for them to still be angry. What I felt was emptier. Like walking past a childhood home that no longer belongs to you. The curtains have changed. The porch light is off. You realize what you thought was home was just a place you were borrowing. I think my mom believed what she said all those years ago. That I wasn't smart enough. Not because she hated me, but because she never believed greatness belonged to people like us. And when Spencer offered a shortcut to something that looked like success, she took it. Not maliciously. Just blindly. But it still broke something in me. And when things break at that age, they never quite come back the same. There's something no one tells you about building your own life from scratch. You don't stop to celebrate the milestones. You're too afraid it'll disappear if you do. So I kept going. Nimbus Path opened a new regional HQ in Boston. I signed the lease myself, standing in the raw space, construction dust everywhere, breathing it in like it was fresh air. We hired 30 new employees that quarter. Our software launched in 2 international markets. I gave a talk at a logistics conference in DC where 3 people I'd once interned under now waited in line to shake my hand. That night, I sat alone at the hotel bar with a glass of red wine, staring out the window at the Capitol. And I felt something strange. Not pride. Not joy. Just peace. A kind of exhale I didn't realize I'd been holding in since I was 19 years old, sitting at my parents' kitchen table, hearing my mother say those words. I still see Spencer around the office sometimes. He keeps his head down. We've never spoken again. I imagine it must be strange for him, coming to work every day in a building where my name is etched into the brass plate at the front desk. But that's not my problem. He made his choices. And I made mine. What people forget is that resilience isn't born. It's built. Quietly. In the cold, in the dark, while everyone else is sleeping. I was never handed anything. And that's why I'll never lose it. It's strange how people from the past always manage to resurface at the oddest moments. I was in Chicago for a quarterly review, one of those exhausting weeks where every day is a blur of presentations, working dinners, and boardroom strategy talk. It was raining that Friday. I remember it vividly because my flight had been delayed twice already, and I was sitting near the gate at O'Hare, checking emails, when I saw the name flash across my phone, incoming call, Mom. I hadn't saved her new number. But I recognized the area code and the last 4 digits. My thumb hovered over the screen for a full 30 seconds. Long enough that it went to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through, "We heard about your company. We saw your picture in the paper. You looked beautiful. Your father cried." That last line hit differently than I expected. Because I hadn't really thought about my dad in a long time. My mom took up more emotional space, her disappointment, her biting comments, her backhanded praise that always came with conditions. My dad was more of a background character. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't kind. He just followed orders. But I thought about him crying. And that image sat with me on the flight home like an unexpected weight. 3 weeks later, I was in the middle of a routine Friday morning strategy call when my assistant, Joelle, buzzed my office. "Sorry to interrupt, Celeste. There's someone here to see you. She says she's family." I stared at the receiver. I already knew. When I walked into the reception area, my mother was standing there, holding her purse like she wasn't sure whether to set it down or use it as armor. Her hair was shorter than I remembered. There were deep lines around her mouth that hadn't been there the last time we'd spoken, God, over 10 years ago now. "Hi," she said, like it was nothing. I didn't speak. I was in town. Thought maybe we could talk. Just for a minute. I told Joelle to hold all calls. We sat across from each other in the small conference room on the west side of the floor. The glass walls made it impossible to hide how uncomfortable we both were. She looked around, clearly surprised. "You run this whole place?" I didn't answer. She nodded slowly. "I didn't think you had it in you," she said, and for a second, I braced for a familiar sting. But then she added, "I was wrong." There it was. Too little, too late, maybe, but it was something. She talked more than I did. She always had. She told me my father had been in and out of hospitals. Something heart-related. That they'd sold the house in Bethlehem and moved into a smaller condo closer to his clinic. That Spencer had moved to Texas, that he was struggling, and that things hadn't quite worked out the way we all thought. She looked at me then. Like she wanted to say more. Apologize. Justify. Beg. But instead, she asked, "Are you happy?" I didn't know how to answer that. Because what does happy mean, really? I had everything I'd worked for: stability, power, freedom, but also this hollow place inside me where a real family should have lived. So I just said, "I'm okay." She nodded, like she understood that was all she was going to get. We didn't hug. She didn't cry. She left just as calmly as she arrived. I sat in that glass room for 10 minutes after she walked out, staring at my reflection in the opposite window. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a chapter had closed, quietly, without fanfare. The next week, Spencer resigned. No notice. Just a formal letter dropped on his manager's desk and a cleared-out desk by noon. I wasn't surprised. Isla told me later he had been underperforming for months. Avoiding responsibility. Blaming junior staff. Classic story. Still, I asked for his resignation letter to be forwarded to me. At the bottom, under his signature, he had written, "To whom it may concern, I'm leaving to pursue other opportunities. Please extend my appreciation to the executive team." No mention of me. No goodbye. But I noticed something in the formatting. The date. It was the same day my mother visited. Which meant she had told him. Or he already knew. Either way, he couldn't stay. Not with the full picture in view. The next few months moved quickly. Nimbus Path opened its West Coast satellite. We secured a major logistics contract that would fund us into Q4 of next year. I was traveling constantly: Denver, Portland, Atlanta. Everywhere I went, people wanted to shake my hand. Hear my story. I started getting invited to panels, conferences, podcasts. And each time, someone would say something like, "Your rise has been incredible." What they didn't know, what they never asked about, was the cost. The years I spent invisible. The sleepless nights. The rage I had to bury so I could function. No one ever asks what success tastes like when it's built on everything you were denied. But I knew. It tasted like silence. And steel. Sometimes, when the office is quiet and the last elevator dings for the night, I walk the floor alone. I look at the rows of desks, the teams working late, the glow of monitors reflecting on glass. And I think about a 19-year-old me. Packing for school. Believing it was the start of something. And it was. Just not in the way I thought. It had been almost a year since Spencer left the company. No fanfare. No new job posted online. No updated LinkedIn. I figured he'd gone underground for a bit. Maybe back to Texas, maybe back to school. Or maybe he was still trying to figure out who he was without the world spoon-feeding him praise. I didn't check. I didn't care. But the universe has a way of tying up loose ends when you least expect it. It started with a networking event in Allentown. Nimbus Path was being honored by the Lehigh Valley Business Chamber for regional impact, and they asked me to speak. Funny, right? I'd once been the invisible girl filing invoices down the road. Now, they were handing me a glass plaque with my name engraved in gold. After the ceremony, there was a cocktail hour. A crowd of people, some new, some familiar. A few former teachers from Lehigh. A city councilwoman. Business owners. Faces I hadn't seen in years. And then came a voice I recognized. Not because it was loud. But because it was rehearsed. Well, I'll be damned. Celeste? I turned. There he was. Uncle Merrick. Older now, but still with that smug self-confidence that made everything feel like a sales pitch. The same plaid sport coat. The same cheap cologne. He smiled like we were long-lost friends. Not the man who sold out my future so his son could wear it like a costume. You've done well for yourself, he said, handing me a drink I didn't ask for. Heard the company's killing it. Logistics software, huh? I said nothing. He leaned in. You know, Spencer's looking for something new right now. Was hoping maybe you'd be open to, no, I said, flat. He blinked. I didn't finish the sentence. You didn't need to. I met his gaze, calm and still. The way you do when you've already won and the other person hasn't caught up yet. He didn't argue. He just gave a dry chuckle and sipped his drink. Well, I guess we all make mistakes, huh? That's true, I said, my voice low. Some of us spend a lifetime paying for them. The next day, I wrote an email to Lehigh University's Career Services Department. I offered to start a scholarship program for underprivileged women pursuing degrees in business and logistics. Full tuition, books, and housing included. I named it the Celeste Rourke Advancement Fund. There was a requirement built in: applicants had to be first-generation college students, with at least 1 year of work experience prior to enrollment. Because I knew what it was like to be counted out. And I wanted to make sure no other girl had to sell her dream for someone else's. A few months later, Spencer emailed me. The subject line was simply, I was wrong. He said he'd been trying to get interviews but wasn't getting far. He admitted he'd coasted for years on the belief that someone would always open the next door for him. Now I realize, he wrote, they were never my doors to begin with. I just walked through the ones you were forced to leave behind. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. He asked if I could put in a word for him at any of my competitors, any place that would give him a chance. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to HR with a note: do not engage. Not out of spite. But because the story had to end somewhere. And that was it. I never went back to my parents' new condo. I sent a card when my dad had surgery, no return address, just a brief note that said, I hope you're okay. He sent back a thank you letter with a photo of us from when I was little. I didn't recognize the girl in the picture. She had too much hope in her eyes. But I framed it anyway. As a reminder. Not of what they took from me. But of everything I rebuilt. And now? Now I wake up every morning in a home I bought myself. I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, looking out over a garden I planted with my own hands. I drive to an office with my name on the wall. I mentor women who remind me of the girl I used to be. And some days, I even allow myself to be proud. Not for what I survived. But for how I thrived. Because revenge doesn't always need blood. Sometimes, it's enough to build the life they said you couldn't have, and let them watch.